Hi! Hello there YouTube. It is May. It is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So I am here right now to recommend you some books by Asian American or Pacific Islander authors, although there's only one book by a Pacific Islander author. Okay, so the first book that I want to talk to you about is Strangers from a Different Shore by Ronald Takaki. I've mentioned this a couple of times before on this channel, but very good nonfiction book of Asian American history from the 1800s all the way up until 1989. A second edition came out in like 2008 or so there's like a more updated version. But it's very thorough and it's very interesting. I think that Ronald Takaki was, unfortunately he died in 2009, but he was an amazing historian because he not only brings in the facts, but he also personalizes it. Something that he says in the first chapter or in the prologue, I don't remember, about how we have to re-envision history, not to be just about the kings and queens and stuff, but to be about the people. He'll talk about like what a traditional like Chinese immigrant in the 1800s had to deal with, while also bringing in those personal stories and showing like, oh, here's this one person who had to deal with like a bunch of violence from white people who didn't really know English and had to like set up their own laundry shop, and then like, I don't know, got into gambling. I think that a lot of people, when they think of history, they think of like a bunch of boring facts that you have to memorize. And it shouldn't be that way. It's a story. And he's a great storyteller, is what I'm getting at. So I love the book. I think that it should be required reading. It's definitely informative in the sense that, like, even though Asia is the largest continent on the planet, a lot of people don't understand the diversity of Asia, and I feel like this really shows the diversity of Asian Americans, and you do get some Asian history in that you have to get the origin story of why did they come here in the first place. But highly recommend it. If you read one book from this list, make it Strangers from a Different Shore, okay? So the next book that I want to recommend to you is No Boy. I didn't look up the author's name before recording this. I think the author's name was John Okada. I read this in college. We read this for a humanities class. So it wasn't necessarily a history class, like you get literature, art, history all in one. I really loved humanities classes. They were great. But what's interesting is that some people went like their entire K through 12 education system without knowing about this whole Japanese American internment thing that had happened in the 1940s. After Pearl Harbor, President Franklin Roosevelt signed this executive order stating that Japanese people were enemy aliens, and a lot of Japanese people, Japanese and Japanese American, they weren't all citizens because there was this like law that non-white immigrants couldn't become American citizens, which you learn about more in Strangers from a Different Shore. But anyway, Japanese and Japanese American people residing in the United States along the West Coast were taken from their homes and put into, it's a controversial term, but the term that was used at the time was concentration camp. So this happened because they were declared enemy aliens, right? But then the government decided, actually we need those American citizens who are in those camps to go off to war. So it was really awful in that, like, Japanese American young men, they'd have their families being put in these camps, but then they'd be expected to fight for their country. But before they fought for their country, they had to agree to two things. They had to forswear any allegiance to the Japanese Empire, and they have to swear allegiance to the United States. Now, many Japanese Americans did this. They fought in World War II, and the idea is that since they had experienced this oppression, a lot of them wanted to really prove that they were American. They wanted to really prove that they were loyal Americans. But then there was a minority who fought this. They answered no and no to these questions. So the main character of No No Boy, as you can guess, answered no and no to these questions. He's not a World War II veteran. It's set after the war, and a lot of the people who had gone to war came back, and they treat him like shit. And he's treated like shit by Japanese Americans who say, like, you know, I fought in this war in order to prove that I'm like a respectable American, while you're here like caving into that stereotype that Asian Americans and Japanese Americans are in fact enemy aliens. So third book that I want to talk to you about is a short story collection. I quite love short story collections. Interpreter of Maladies by Jhumpa Lahiri. It won the Pulitzer Prize back in 1999. Very good short story collection. We have young characters, we have old characters, most of the main characters are Indian. This was a short story collection that made me fall in love with short stories because I couldn't believe that it's been only 20 or so pages with these characters and I love them so much. Like I was attached to them the same way I'd be attached to characters in a full-length novel. So this really showed me how you can really put a lot of complexity, a lot of depth in a few pages, and yeah, really liked that. So the third book that I want to recommend to you is Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki, which is this kind of dual story. You have this girl named Naoko, and she is in Japan. She was originally, I think she was maybe born in the United States. When she was a teenager, she moved to Japan, and she's bullied a lot for being foreign. So she writes in her diary about her experience at school and about her experience being bullied and how her dad is in such a horrible like financial state. So she's having a lot of troubles with that. And then the other story is about Ruth, a fictionalized version of the author who finds Naoko's diary while she's in the beach in Canada. She believes that it came over from the tsunami, but we're not really ever given an explanation of how the diary came to her. There's a tiny bit of like magical realism in the book. It's a story of Ruth reading that diary and really connecting to Naoko. I really like how we learn about like 3 different women in very different age groups. Naoko is 16 years old. Ruth, I think, is in her 40s. And Naoko also writes about her grandmother, or her great-grandmother, who's 104 years old. One of her goals in writing the diary is that she wants to tell her grandmother's story. So, next book that I want to talk to you about is Girl in Translation by Jean Kwok. So it is about a young immigrant named Kimberly. It follows her from when she's like maybe 12 years old, I want to say, to when she's 18. And then there's an epilogue of when she's like an adult. She comes from Hong Kong to New York City, and her aunt set her and her mom up in this awful apartment that had no heat. It's very dirty. There's cockroaches everywhere. And she and her mother work at a sweatshop. So Kimberly does not speak English very well at all. And she struggles in school because of that, but also she is very gifted in math and science. So much so that she ends up getting a full scholarship to a prestigious private school. So it's like about her kind of navigating those two worlds. I really enjoyed the book. I didn't like the ending, but I don't want to explain why because spoilers. But the rest of the book I enjoyed. So the next book that I want to recommend is Everything Asian. I believe the author's name was Sung Jae-woo. This is a story about a Korean immigrant, and he lives in New Jersey. In the first chapter, the character in the story is like 30 or something, and he gets a call from his older sister that the store that they used to work at as kids is being torn down. I think the whole mall where he used to work is being torn down. So he and his sister travel to see where this mall was, and it takes him down memory lane, and then the whole rest of the book is about what it was like for him when he was, I think, 12 years old, and he was working at a store in the mall that his dad owned. It was about, like, I guess their journey as new immigrants in America. Every other chapter would be this one-off story about somebody else who worked at the same mall as him. So I really enjoyed it. It's a cute story. Let's get on to the one book by a Pacific Islander author, Whale Rider by Witi Ihimaera. So Whale Rider is about a young girl. I think she's 8 years old. In the movie that was made about this, the movie is gorgeous, by the way, but it's very different from the book, and the girl was aged up to like about 12 in that movie, but in the book she's 8. She is indigenous Maori girl. Her grandfather doesn't really have a lot of love for her because he wanted her to be a boy. Good bit of mythology. There's girl dismantling the patriarchy. There's, in the movie, if you watch the movie, there's beautiful scenery. Although, of course, as I said, it's different. One of the differences is that in the book it's narrated by Uncle Raoui. I think that was his name. But in the movie it's narrated by the girl. So I'm gonna have to rush to conclude this now. I'm sorry that I ran out of space. I hope that you check out some of these books. I hope that I've mentioned something that you might find interesting. And if you have any recommendations for me, then leave them below in the comments. Bye. See you later.